All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Sorry about earlier phone calls, both my brother call, and I had a sneezing fit, so I'll read more on that. But we're going to read some history about General George Custer. They are telling all. That's what it says in the title here. So they're telling what happened. Here we go. So Grant and the Post tradership, General Custer tells all he has known for years how the evidence against Babcock was stolen. The post office fraud. All right. The Daily Continue expose of the Republican administrator at Washington, by which it was involved the members of the cabinet, the president, the generals, and almost everybody that is in any position are being made by the Democrat investigation community. The War, Post Office, and Navy Department all showing fearful corruption. We copied some of the latest from Washington Dispatch, merely adding the to the publish. All would take a book instead of a county paper. General George Custer here. Evidence. Now, General Custer was before the Congressional Investigation Committee Saturday. He testified that he is in command at Fort A. Lincoln, Dakota, where he has been for 3 years. He referred to the removal of the post trader, their S.D. Dickey, and the appointment of Secretary Belknap in May 1874. Robert S. Sipp, a partner of Dickey's, published a letter charging that Belknap was interested in with Sipp in a letter to witness Belknap ran and accusing as a lie. Sipp subsequently complained that no officer ought to have a right to buy or bring goods to the post, except through him. The secretary issued a circular which is said that no one had the right to sell goods, but the regular post trader Captain Poland, one of the officers, had protested against Sipp's price and had introduced goods, but this was stopped by General Custer. Continued. After the Volknet exposed, I sent for Sipp and asked him what he had been paying to hold his post. He said he estimated his profit at $15,000 annual. One third it was paid to General Henrick of Iowa, and the third one third to General Rice in Washington. Out of his profit of 15,000, he only received 2,500. He said he did not know what that he understood the portion of it went to Secretary of War. Sometime later last year, some of my command went to Kentucky to buy horses. While there, they met a man named Tomlinson. He told the officer that he had a trader at Fort Rice appointed and was interested in one third of the profits, and his particularly inquired how the post was doing. Now, Custer said he told the Secretary of War once that Snip was holding a whip over the heads of the office on account of having great influence with the Secretary of War. The Secretary made no reply but tossed his head as if to say, "You shouldn't believe all you hear." I met Bonfin, or I don't have to say that, and Orville Grant at one time on the frontier. They wanted transportation to visit 4 Indian posts. Grant asked me if I would furnish him an ambulance to make the trip. Bonfin told me he was interested with Oral Grant in several posts. When Grant got back to Bismarck, he found there would be some difficulty in his holdings. The Fort Berthold post, whereupon he telegraphed the Secretary Delano to appoint a man named Raymond, who was appointed. Raymond subsequently said that he had paid Grant $1,000 for getting him the place. Question: did Orville Grant ever show you any authority from the President or the Secretary of the Interior, the connection with the Indian Post? Answer: no, sir. He never showed me any authority, but he said he had it. Witness said, in his judgment, the law giving him the appointment of post traders to the Secretary of War did not affect the morals of the Army. He was glad to say it did have the efforts, however, in adding to the embarrassment of the frontier life. He thought it had increased the expenses and inconvenience of living on the frontier under the old law. Was impossible to form a ring. Witness has known the trader of Fort A. Lincoln to stop an officer wagon and inspect it to see if that he had brought no goods at the post 4 miles before, where they could be going. 10.5 price. Question: did you ever represent the state affair of Secretary of War? Answer: no, sir. Did not, because I was just as suspicious of the Secretary of War as I was earlier. Well, can't say. I'll say earlier. I believe the settlers at the Fort Buford pays a large sum of money to General Hendricks. The officer of the Army always regards Secretary of War as a silent partner in the trading post. Witness say that the trader at the Fort Peck was about to be removed when he obtained some affidavits showing that Orville Grant and Leighton brothers were mixed in Indian fraud. This house showed several, and he was allowed to remain. Now, President Grant and the thieves, evidence given Friday before the community expedition in the War Department was of the most interesting character. Lieutenant Robert Carter of the 4th Cavalry fully corroborated all the statements made by General McCook in regards to refusal of General McKenzie to obey the order of General Reynolds to receive at Fort Richardson 50,000 to 75,000 bushel of corn delivered by Adams and Hicks. The contractor who had President Reynolds with a 10,000 house at San Antonio, Texas. Corn was finally received when the Board of Inquiry ordered by General McKenzie condemning the corn was not respected at Washington, and the pre-emptory order came from received forage. The corn was so damaged that the horses would not eat it. It was rejected by McKenzie both on the counts of the damaged condition and because it was to be paid for at the time the rate was 20 cents per bushel. More than a ground corn could be procured from other contractors. General Reynolds preferred charges against McKenzie for sabotage, but he never dare force a trial on them. General McKenzie demanded a trial, but no attention was paid to his demand. The testimony of J.F. Barrow in regards to his appointment as suitors at Fort Union, New Mexico, in 1868 was the most damning evidence which has yet been given against President Grant. It was as follows: was post trader at Fort Union, New Mexico, 1868, was appointed by General Grant, who was General of the Army, was recommended by D.W.D. Bernard, a brother-in-law of John C. Dent. I had tried to get the place and could not, and was told to apply to Bernard. He asked me to make out my application, which I did, and he wrote a letter to General Grant, which he showed me, in which he asked for my appointed esteem that he was to get 1/3 of the profit. Question: are you sure of that? Answer: yes, sir. He showed me the letter, which was a long one, and I read it. It stated that he was to have 1/3 of the profit. After I held the place some time, Bernard was appointed in my place, and I was relieved. Bernard wrote me to see Dent and see upon what terms he could buy my goods. I sold out my stock to J.C. Dent at the loss of $25,000. The total loss of in my operation was about $48,000. When I was supplemented by Bernard, I wrote to General Grant complaining of the treatment I got. No reply from him. In the letter Bernard wrote to Grant, he said, I am sure that he was to receive 1/3 of the profit. Bernard and John C. Dent married sisters. Bernard is now a bank examiner at St. Louis. He is a man of loose and profound habits. Question: at the time you made the arrangement with Bernard, and was Dent interested in the third profits? A. Answer: I don't think he was. Dent was appointed post trader at Camp Supply by General Grant. Influence. He showed me a letter that effect. Question: how long had you held the Fort Union under General Grant's appointment before you were relieved? Well, answer: about 8 months. I had invested 37,000 goods and 7,000 in buildings. Witness lives at the President of New York and the Commission Merchants. When he wrote to General Grant complaining of being removed, he stated to him in the letter this arrangement of Bernard and asked at least another post. He never heard from that letter. Now, question: did you know how Bernard got his post? Answer: he got it through General Grant. Dent still at Fort Union as suitor. Dent arranged my sale of goods to Bernard. I sold out to him at his own terms because I couldn't get any better from him. Now, before we left New Mexico, Dent and myself there we go. Come on. Enter into agreement about the sale of goods. He was to give me 5,000 in cash and 2 lots in St. Louis. The lots were charged to me at 10,000, and I was obligated to sell them at 40,500. I took his notes for 27,000 on account for a term forced upon me by Dent. I was obligated to settle with my credits at 40 cents on the dollar. The transaction ruined me financially when Bernard wrote to General Grant asking for the Fort Union post. That he also wrote a letter to Miss Grant requesting her influence. I didn't know whether General Grant ever got Bernard's letter, or other than I know I was appointed. Question: what means had you of knowing that Bernard and influence of General Grant? Answer: well, General Grant lived with Bernard in St. Louis when he got a poor man. Question: was General Grant over a poor man? Answer: it was no, so understood in St. Louis when he lived there, just after I left Fort Union to go to St. Louis to buy the goods, and was still the trader. Bernard, whom I left there, bet 2 wagon loads of sugar and coffee belonging to me on the result of a New York election, which he lost. This shows what kind of man he was. Gigantic corruption fund, fraud fund. So F.C. Taylor, again, before the post office community today, and testified subsequential as yesterday the books of F.P. Sawyer being produced, and his statement collaborate prominently in all transactions from 1868 when Randall was postmaster general down to the middle of 1872. Thomas Hood and modern Daniel Lambert in size as and king of post office lobby was paid over 20,000. He was also present with a gold watch and had numerous bills for sun drive paid by Sawyer. This Hood was a cover more rascally than could be found out of the Congress. He was patent with Postmaster General Randall, and Croswell received over $30,000 for securing payment of a large claim for printing postal routes in the Washington paper, and is now the honor of the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia, which is a position he is entitling him to the confidence of everybody who can pay his price for the service rendering. The book of Sawyer also showed that over 30,000 was paid on account him being a disguise for covering bogus contracts. The president's brother-in-law, Louis Dent, was well paid for his service as attorney. Ex-Congressman Clark of Texas got $5,000 while he was a member of Congress. D.O. Floyd, contract clerk in the post office department, and received $100 a month for his services. Judge Pascal was Sawyer's attorney for several years, and his fees put up to $15,000. Unknown, supposed to be Route. Got a gold watch costing $230. Johnson's attorney got over $16,000. The expenses account not entering until May 1875. The following remarkable record in transaction of 1872 expenses account. F.P. Sawyer attorney fees and costs paid in purchase of a contract, $72,843. And again, the interest out of the book shows that $26,000 was paid to attorney. Explanation of the attorney business is simply this: the officials on the post office department receive at least one half of the amount paid to the attorney. No man whose business was honestly conducted had any reason for being taxed, as Sawyer was, and no man who was pretended have expand such sum. Sawyer did, but the suspicion fall upon the post office community of the House, which in 1872, in the investigation, the very charge now made clear that possession of the books of later Mr. F.P. Sawyer, who then swore that he never spent a cent on purchasing contracts. Members of the post office community are now conflicted that of $120,000 charge to expenses account. Some of the money was used in quiet. Republican members of the community. The books of Sawyer shows how fearful, corrupted the post office was under Randall and Croswell, particularly later. How poor man could build rows of elegant brick dwelling on a clerk's salary, and now fully explain. Let's see here. What else here? All right, let's see what else here I can find. Okay, Parkway history unfolds picture quest fashion. So this is Colonel George Armstrong Custer and his dog in action at the Battle of Williamsburg in 1862. And then, where else here? Nope, nothing else there. But there he is with his dog. Um, here we go. Historian argues General Custer's reason for splitting up his command. It was 90 years ago this week. The most famous and talked about battle between the Indians and the United States Army was fought in the valley of Little Bighorn River in southern Montana. Now, nation sends a spacecraft to the planet, but the years have been a little strange change. Or the Green Rolling Hills, where General George Custer and his entire force of 262 men were annihilated June 25th, 1876. Only a cavalry officer's horse, Comanche, survived the massacre. The site of the battle now is the Custer Battlefield National Monument. At the top of the rolling hills is a national cemetery where Custer men lie beside victims of other wars. Crow Indian tribe will reenact the Great Battle on that weekend, similar beginning Saturday. They will portray it from the Indians' point of view. Settings is about a mile from the actual battle site. The colorful garbed crow will ride into action against the blue clawed cavalry. They will portray the last great gathering of the Indian warriors, determined to define their homes and hunting grounds against the invading white men. The museum on the battlefield, it was realistic of the fight and small white markers which shows where each man fell to fail to tell. The total story of Custer's last stand, it may never be told completely. Historians argue about why Custer divided his command into three detachments and found only his segment battling some 5,000 Sioux and Cheyenne Indians. Is the rest over here? Okay, where's the rest? There must be nothing left. All right, I'll go back here. Let's see here. Find some more. All right, here we go. This is July 9th, 1876. The fate of Custer, the grounds where they fought previous Indians wars. Terry Dispatch, Chicago, Illinois, July 6th. Lieutenant General P.H. Sheridan, Continental Hotel, Philadelphia. The following is the General Terry Dispatch marked confident. Camp on the Yellowstone River near mouth of the Bighorn, July 2nd. I think I owe it to myself to put you in more full possession of the fact of the late operation. While at the mouth of Rosebud, I submitted my plan to General Gibson and General Custer. They approved it heartily. It was that Custer, with his white regiment, should move up the Rosebud till he should met the trail which Reno had discovered a few days before, but that he should not follow it directly to Little Bighorn, that he should send scouts over it and keep the main force farther to the south, so as to prevent the Indians from slipping in between himself and the mountain. He was also examined the headwater of Toluca Creek as he passed it and send me word of what he found there. The scout was furnished him for a purpose of crossing the country to me. We calculated it would take Gibson's column until the 26th to reach the mouth of the Little Bighorn, and that the wide sweep which I have proposed Custer should make would require so much time that Gibson would be able to cooperate with him in attacking the Indians that might be found on the stream. I asked Custer how long his marches would be. He said they would be at first about 30 miles a day. Measures were made in calculation based on the rate of progress. I talked with him about the stretch, and at one time suggested perhaps it would be well for me to take Gibson cavalry and go with him. To the suggestion, he replied that without reference to the command, he would prefer his own regiment alone as homogeneous body as much could be done with it as with the two combined. He expressed the utmost confidence that he had all the force that he could need and need to share his confidence. The plan adopted was the only one which promised to bring the infantry into action. Now, getting up every available man, I offered Custer the battery of Gatling guns, but he declined it, saying that it might embarrass him, that he was strong enough without it. The movement proposed General Gibson column were carried out to the letter, and had attack been deferred until it was up, I couldn't doubt that we should have been successful. The Indians had eventually nerved themselves for a stand, but as I learned from the Captain Benton, on the 22nd, the cavalry marched 12 miles on 23rd, 25 miles from the 5th, from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. On the 24th, 45 miles, and then after night, 10 miles further, then after resting, but without unsaddling, 53 miles to the battlefields. The proposed route was not taken, but as soon as the trail was stuck, it was followed. I can't learn that any examination of Toluca Creek was made. A.H. Terry, Major General Commanding. The ground on which they fought. Little Bighorn flows north into the Bighorn River, which is convenient of Yellowstone, uniting with the later stream at Fort Pease. To the west, wandering of the fortified village of Rosebud Creek. To the south of the Indian position, some 20 or more miles, was permanent supply camp General Crook. General Gibson was north of the Indians, up the Yellowstone and some district to the north. Ward. General Carr was 60 or 80 miles to the westward and rapidly approaching the Indians with his 8 companies of the cavalry. When Custer, pursuing the valley of the Bighorn and Little Bighorn River, was intent either on cutting off the retreat of the Indians to the westward or forming junction with General Crook south of him, or with General Gibson north of him. Most likely the later. All the location names are south of the Yellowstone River and among the various ranges composing the Black Hills. Let's see, anything else here? Let's see. That's something about the War of 1812, and then another war. All right, let me see here. Well, I'm going to stop there. Hey, thanks for coming. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you guys all later. Talk to you later. Bye.